My name is Jake, and I've been married to my wife Rebecca for 7 years. Until recently, I thought we had a solid relationship built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. I was wrong about a lot of things, but mostly I was wrong about Rebecca's capacity for honesty and her ability to take responsibility for her actions. Rebecca and I met in college and got married when we were both 25. We've always been pretty different people. She's outgoing and social while I'm more introverted and analytical, but those differences seem to complement each other well for most of our marriage. Rebecca works as a marketing manager for a local company, and I work as a software engineer for a tech startup. We bought a house together 4 years ago, and we'd been talking about starting a family soon. About a year ago, Rebecca decided she wanted to get in better shape and hired a personal trainer named Derek who worked at an upscale gym across town. She'd been feeling self-conscious about gaining some weight over the years, and she wanted to build confidence and improve her health before we started trying to have children. I was supportive of her fitness goals, and I was happy that she'd found something that motivated her and made her feel good about herself. Derek was 28, single, and exactly the kind of guy you'd expect to find working as a personal trainer at an expensive gym. He was tall, muscular, charming, and had that confident personality that some people find irresistible. Rebecca would come home from her training sessions talking about how knowledgeable Derek was and how much he was helping her improve her fitness and confidence. Initially, Rebecca was training with Derek twice a week, but after a few months, she increased it to 3 times per week because she said she was making such good progress and really enjoying the workouts. She also started spending more time at the gym on her own, saying that Derek had given her additional exercises to do and that she wanted to maximize her results. I was pleased that Rebecca was so committed to her fitness goals, and I could see that she was getting stronger and more confident. She seemed happier and more energetic, and she would talk enthusiastically about her workouts and the progress she was making. I thought it was great that she'd found something she was passionate about, and I encouraged her to continue with the training as long as she was enjoying it. Over time, I started noticing that Rebecca's conversations about her workouts began to focus more on Derek himself rather than the actual exercises or fitness progress. She would tell me stories about Derek's background, his other clients, his philosophy about health and wellness, and his plans for expanding his training business. It seemed like they were having a lot of personal conversations during their sessions, which struck me as a bit unusual but not necessarily concerning. Rebecca also started working out at different times than she had initially scheduled. She would say that Derek had changed her appointment times to accommodate his schedule or that she was doing additional sessions when the gym was less crowded. Sometimes she would be gone for 2 or 3 hours for what was supposed to be a 1-hour training session, and when I asked about it, she would explain that she'd stayed to use the sauna or had done extra cardio after her session with Derek. About 6 months into Rebecca's training with Derek, I started noticing some changes in her behavior that made me slightly uncomfortable. She became more secretive about her phone, taking it with her to the bathroom and turning it face down when she wasn't using it. She also started dressing differently for her workouts, wearing more expensive and revealing athletic wear that seemed designed to show off her improved physique. When I mentioned these observations to Rebecca, she explained that Derek had recommended certain types of workout clothes for optimal performance and that she wanted to invest in quality gear since she was taking her fitness seriously. As for the phone behavior, she said she was trying to be more present during our time together and didn't want to be distracted by work emails and social media notifications. These explanations seemed reasonable, and I didn't want to be the suspicious husband who questioned his wife's legitimate interests and activities. I trusted Rebecca, and I tried to ignore the small voice in my head that suggested something might be developing between her and Derek beyond a professional trainer-client relationship. The situation became more concerning when Rebecca started mentioning that Derek was having some personal problems and that she felt bad for him. She said he was going through a difficult breakup with his girlfriend and was struggling financially because he was trying to start his own training business. Rebecca seemed very invested in Derek's personal life and would update me regularly on his various challenges and setbacks. Rebecca also began suggesting that we should help Derek with his business by referring friends to him or by investing in his plans to open his own gym. She said Derek was incredibly talented and deserving of success, and that we should support him however we could. I found it strange that Rebecca was so concerned about her trainer's business prospects, but I assumed she was just being kind and supportive to someone who had helped her achieve her fitness goals. The red flags became impossible to ignore when Rebecca started having evening phone calls with Derek that she claimed were about workout planning and nutrition advice. These calls would last for an hour or more, and Rebecca would take them in another room, saying that Derek needed her full attention to discuss complex training protocols and meal planning strategies. When I pointed out that it seemed unusual for a personal trainer to need such extensive phone consultations with a client, Rebecca became defensive and accused me of not supporting her fitness journey. She said that Derek was providing her with a level of personalized attention and expertise that justified the additional communication, and that I should be grateful that she was working with someone who cared so much about her progress. I also noticed that Rebecca had started working out at the gym on weekends, which was new because she'd previously preferred to keep weekends free for relaxation and spending time together. She would say that Derek had recommended weekend sessions to accelerate her progress or that she wanted to take advantage of the gym being less crowded on Saturday and Sunday mornings. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March when Rebecca came home from what was supposed to be a routine training session looking disheveled and upset. Her hair was messy, her face was flushed, and she seemed nervous and distracted. When I asked if everything was okay, she said she'd had a really intense workout and was just tired and needed to shower. That evening, Rebecca was unusually quiet and seemed preoccupied with her phone. She kept checking messages and typing responses, which was unlike her typical evening routine. When I asked who she was texting, she said it was just work stuff and some messages from friends, but her evasiveness made me suspicious. The next morning, Rebecca sat me down and said she needed to tell me something important that had happened during her training session the previous day. She looked nervous and upset, and I immediately knew that whatever she was about to tell me was going to be significant and probably not good news. Rebecca started by explaining that she and Derek had been doing a new exercise routine that involved some complex movements and close physical contact for spotting and assistance. She said that during one particular exercise, something unexpected and completely accidental had happened that she needed to be honest with me about. According to Rebecca's story, she and Derek had been working on a stretching routine that required Derek to help her with flexibility and range of motion. During this stretching session, Rebecca claimed that she had lost her balance and fell backward, and that Derek had tried to catch her but had also lost his balance in the process. Rebecca then told me that when they both fell, they had somehow ended up in a compromising position where Derek had accidentally landed on top of her, and that in the confusion and attempt to get back up, they had somehow accidentally kissed. She insisted that it was completely unintentional and that they were both shocked and embarrassed by what had happened. But the story got even more unbelievable from there. Rebecca claimed that after the accidental kiss, they were both so flustered and confused that they continued to accidentally engage in increasingly intimate physical contact while trying to disentangle themselves and return to their normal workout routine. According to Rebecca, what started as an accidental fall and kiss had somehow accidentally escalated into them accidentally removing some of their clothing and accidentally engaging in activity. She insisted that none of it was intentional and that they were both just caught up in a series of accidents and misunderstandings that had spiraled out of control. Rebecca concluded her story by emphasizing that she felt terrible about what had happened and that it was completely uncharacteristic for both her and Derek. She said they had immediately agreed that it was a mistake and that it would never happen again, and that she was telling me about it because she believed in honesty and transparency in our marriage. I sat there listening to this absolutely ridiculous story, trying to process what my wife was telling me and whether she actually expected me to believe that she had accidentally cheated on me with her personal trainer. The idea that two adults could accidentally fall into activity through a series of mishaps and confusion was so absurd that I initially thought Rebecca might be joking or testing my reaction. When I realized that Rebecca was serious about this explanation, I asked her to clarify exactly how someone accidentally removes their clothes and accidentally engages in activity with another person. Rebecca became defensive and said that I wasn't understanding the complexity of the situation and that it had all happened very quickly in a moment of confusion and disorientation. I pointed out that activity requires a series of deliberate choices and actions that cannot reasonably be described as accidental, and that her story didn't make logical sense. Rebecca accused me of being unsympathetic and not trying to understand how traumatic and confusing the experience had been for her. Rebecca also claimed that Derek was equally upset about the incident and that he had been texting her to apologize and to discuss how they could prevent anything like this from happening again. She said that's why she'd been on her phone so much the previous evening, because Derek was trying to process his own guilt and confusion about the situation. When I asked Rebecca whether she planned to continue training with Derek after this incident, she said that Derek had suggested they could continue working together if they established better boundaries and were more careful about exercises that involved physical contact. She seemed surprised when I suggested that continuing to work with Derek might not be the best idea given what had happened. I told Rebecca that I found her story completely unbelievable and that I thought she was insulting my intelligence by expecting me to accept such an obviously fabricated explanation for what was clearly intentional infidelity. Rebecca became angry and accused me of calling her a liar and not giving her the benefit of the doubt during a difficult and embarrassing situation. Rebecca insisted that she was telling me the truth and that my refusal to believe her was hurtful and damaging to our marriage. She said that she had been honest with me about something that she didn't have to tell me about, and that my response was making her regret being transparent about the incident. The argument that followed was one of the worst fights we'd ever had. Rebecca maintained that her story was accurate and that I was being unreasonable and suspicious for not accepting her explanation. I insisted that her story was impossible to believe and that she needed to take responsibility for making a conscious choice to cheat on me rather than pretending it was some kind of accident. Rebecca also demanded that I apologize for not believing her and for accusing her of lying about something so serious and traumatic. She said that my lack of trust was more damaging to our marriage than the incident itself, and that I needed to work on my jealousy and insecurity issues if we were going to move forward together. I was absolutely amazed by Rebecca's ability to turn the situation around and make me the villain for not believing her obviously false story. She seemed genuinely indignant that I wouldn't accept her explanation, and she acted like I was being unreasonable and hurtful for questioning the details of her account. Over the next few days, Rebecca continued to insist that her story was true and that I owed her an apology for not supporting her during a difficult time. She also continued to text with Derek, claiming that they needed to discuss the incident and establish new boundaries for their professional relationship. I told Rebecca that if she wanted to save our marriage, she needed to stop all contact with Derek immediately and start being honest about what had actually happened between them. Rebecca refused to cut contact with Derek, saying that she couldn't just abandon her fitness goals because of one unfortunate incident, and that Derek was helping her process her feelings about what had happened. Rebecca's refusal to stop seeing Derek and her continued insistence on her accident story made it clear to me that she was not serious about repairing our marriage or taking responsibility for her actions. I realized that she was more committed to maintaining her relationship with Derek than to rebuilding trust with me. I decided to do some investigation on my own to better understand what had been happening between Rebecca and Derek. I looked through our credit card statements and discovered that Rebecca had been spending much more money at the gym than she had told me about, including charges for massage therapy and other services that she had never mentioned. I also found evidence that Rebecca and Derek had been meeting outside of their scheduled training sessions, including restaurant charges and hotel expenses that coincided with times when Rebecca claimed to be at work or running errands. It became clear that their relationship had been much more extensive and personal than Rebecca had ever admitted. When I confronted Rebecca with this evidence, she initially denied that the charges were related to Derek, but eventually admitted that they had occasionally met for coffee or meals to discuss her fitness progress and goals. She insisted that these meetings were professional in nature and that I was reading too much into innocent business relationships. Rebecca also claimed that the hotel charges were for spa services and massages that Derek had recommended as part of her recovery and wellness routine. When I pointed out that the charges were for room rentals rather than spa services, Rebecca became angry and accused me of spying on her and violating her privacy. The final straw came when I discovered text messages between Rebecca and Derek that clearly showed they had been having an affair for several months before the supposed accident. The messages included explicit content, declarations of love, and discussions about leaving their respective partners to be together. When I showed Rebecca these messages, she finally admitted that she had been having an affair with Derek, but she continued to insist that the specific incident she had told me about had happened accidentally as she described. She claimed that while their relationship had become romantic over time, the encounter she had confessed to had still occurred accidentally during a training session. I was amazed by Rebecca's continued commitment to her accident story even after admitting to the broader affair. She seemed to believe that maintaining this one fictional detail would somehow make her behavior less hurtful or more forgivable, even though the evidence clearly showed that their entire relationship had been deceptive and intentional. Rebecca eventually gave up trying to convince me that any part of her affair had been accidental, but she never apologized for lying about it or for insulting my intelligence with such an absurd story. Instead, she claimed that she had been trying to protect my feelings by minimizing the intentional aspects of her relationship with Derek. I filed for divorce 2 weeks after discovering the text messages, and Rebecca was shocked that I wasn't willing to work on our marriage through counseling or therapy. She seemed to believe that her partial honesty about the affair should have been enough to rebuild our relationship, and she couldn't understand why I was unwilling to forgive her mistakes and move forward together. The divorce process revealed additional lies and deceptions that Rebecca had been maintaining throughout our marriage. She had been hiding money, making financial commitments without my knowledge, and had been planning to leave me for Derek for several months before I discovered the affair. Rebecca's behavior during the divorce was consistent with her behavior during the affair. She continued to lie, manipulate, and refuse to take full responsibility for her actions. She portrayed herself as the victim of my unreasonable expectations and jealousy, and she claimed that I had driven her into Derek's arms through my neglect and lack of appreciation. Looking back on the whole experience, I'm still amazed by Rebecca's commitment to her accident story and her belief that I should have accepted such an obviously false explanation for her infidelity. The incident taught me important lessons about the lengths some people will go to avoid accountability and the importance of trusting my own judgment when something doesn't make sense. Rebecca's refusal to be honest about her affair, even when caught with overwhelming evidence, showed me that she had never respected me or our marriage enough to tell me the truth. Her expectation that I should apologize for not believing her lies was perhaps the most insulting aspect of the entire situation. The experience also taught me that some people will create elaborate fictional narratives to avoid confronting the reality of their own choices and actions. Rebecca's accident story was so detailed and committed that I sometimes wondered if she had convinced herself that it was partially true, even though the evidence clearly showed otherwise. Today, I'm grateful that I discovered Rebecca's true character before we had children together or made other major life commitments based on false foundations. While the divorce was painful and expensive, it freed me from a relationship built on lies and manipulation, and it gave me the opportunity to find someone who shares my values of honesty and accountability. The accident story has become something of a cautionary tale among my friends and family about the importance of maintaining reasonable expectations for honesty and responsibility in relationships. Rebecca's behavior was so extreme and absurd that it serves as a clear example of what unacceptable relationship behavior looks like. I learned that when someone's story doesn't make logical sense, it's usually because they're lying, and that trusting my own judgment and common sense is more important than giving people the benefit of the doubt when evidence suggests they're being deceptive. Sometimes the most obvious explanation is the correct one, regardless of how much someone insists otherwise.